Hello, everyone. This is the Psychology of Human Sexuality, and today we're talking about the section that we're calling Communication and Sexuality. And so this will be an integral discussion that involves both the communication aspect and the sexuality aspects within relationships. Okay? So, one of the first things to talk about in this section would be what intimacy really is. And when we say the word intimacy, what we're usually referring to is the idea of emotional connection. Okay? So, we're talking about attachment and other ways in which we go about forming and maintaining relationships with others. Now, the capacity for verbal communication as an engine of emotional closeness is an evolutionarily relatively new phenomenon and appears to exist only in humans. In modern humans, though, we also have the capacity to generate closeness of an emotional kind that develops through things like conflict resolution, sharing activities, moving beyond barriers and handling crises, self-validation, and to a lesser extent, unilateral disclosure. So, so a few ideas here beyond that include that, and you know this, don't you, that talking is not necessarily communicating. You can speak about any number of things, and if all you did was talk about very superficial things, like the sky is blue and the Sooners will be good this year, then you're really not binding partners within a relationship in the same way that you would if on occasion, at the very least, talked about things that were of a deep level of self-disclosure, at least deeper, that would include things like your fears, your dreams, your ideas, your ambitions, things that made you sad, all the things that are not the things that you would talk with just anyone about. Right? Now, another related idea is that not talking is not the same as not communicating. Okay, so things like touch, and receiving and sending nonverbal signals, which some have claimed is the overwhelming majority of communication, is connected to intimacy. Now, if you remove the vocal aspects of nonverbal and only concentrated on the portion of nonverbal communication that is facial expressions and movements and those sorts of things, you're talking about somewhere around 40 to 50%, somewhere in that range. All right, now, a few other ideas. And this is pretty interesting. Think about this. The person with the least desire for emotional closeness is the one who controls the intimacy, the emotional closeness in the relationship. So, if there's a big difference there, wherein one person really likes to go to the deeper aspects of self-disclosure and hear about that from a partner, usually this is the female in a male-female relationship, and the other partner, more often than not the male, doesn't really have experience with that or doesn't like it or finds it threatening, then there has to be some reconciling there. There has to be some way in which the couple figures out how to manage that difference. Because what you want is a relationship that eventually, if it's a lifelong relationship, to end up being the case where you are each other's best friend. And that means that you can talk about darn near anything. So there has to be some movement by the person who is not as comfortable or as experienced in self-disclosure at deeper levels towards the end of deeper kinds of communication. And the person who wants more of it needs to back off just a little bit and entice and reward discussions that go to a deeper level. Demanding it from a partner will not work, and it is very threatening to the partner who isn't used to or is fearful of that sort of communication. Okay. Now, superficial talk, okay, is not true intimacy, but it is mildly connective. You're keeping each other up with the things going on about the house and about the day and about those sorts of things. Hey, how was the drive into work? Well, it was fine, but it was raining, so I had to go slower, and I was a few minutes late, but it's all right. That's superficial stuff, but it is mildly connecting, isn't it? Yeah, you're sharing your lives with each other, which include non-emotional things. So now, that being said, deep level talk, deep level self-disclosure should not dominate communications. It shouldn't be mostly what you talk about. Okay? But it is something to visit periodically. Yeah? Okay. So, when you're talking about developing a truly good, deep relationship, there are a number of things that each person in that relationship must actually give up. And these things are predominantly about giving up the ego, giving up the need to be in charge or right, or constantly fortifying oneself at the expense of someone else, which is often what happens. So things like you have to give up the idea that, I'll disclose, but only if you tell me about you first, or I'll talk to you, but only if you don't reject what I say, or we can talk, but can't be anything negative. I'll listen to you, but if you hurt my feelings, I won't say anything in return, or I'll hurt you in return. And when I want sex, you should have sex with me, or one day you'll be what I hoped you would be. Those last few are off the mark a bit, but the point is here, you have to give these things up. To give them up. Okay? This is hard for some people. Many people don't know the numbers, but many people go into what they think is a very deep relationship that they want to last, and they believe that they have to have full control over not only themselves but the dynamics of the relationship, and that's not a way to make a good end. So if you look at people who have a good enough, good, excellent, lasting relationship, then what you're talking about are two people who are giving up both pretenses and defenses. And this relationship requires that you have both differentiation and connection. You have separate lives, separate people, separate and different characteristics and ideas and desires, but you also have this connection aspect. Okay? You will see in these kinds of great relationships where they have an understanding for their partner's willingness at any given moment for comfort and closeness emotionally, that they understand that. They see that need and they provide that. You see, there's an ebb and flow in close relationships. One day I need closeness more than you do, and one day you need more than I do. One day I need you to listen to me for something I need to talk about, it happened at work, whatever, and another day you do. And when one of us is in trouble, the other picks up the slack, becomes the partner that is the rock, you see, and you trade off that status of being the rock. Okay. It also appears to be true with respect to sex, which we'll talk about later. I want to be clear that there are times when couples who are conflict habituated, which means they have a lot of disagreement about things. They bicker a lot. See, that's a style that they've developed, unfortunately, and none of that really ends the relationship, but they find themselves disagreeing and bickering. That in some cases, the way they resolve those incidences of bickering is they have make-up sex, which can sometimes be extremely powerful. And in some of those cases, even, some of the conditioning that occurs inadvertently is that you can be training yourself, shaping yourself, conditioning yourself to have arguments in order to have the great sex. I'm not sure how many people have recognized that outcome, but that can happen. Okay, so when you form when you form a relationship composed of each of you, you may recall this discussion from another video, that the relationship itself begins to have needs that either one of you may not be in touch with at all or may not want to be a part of. And an example I often use is if you all are having trouble in a relationship, you would go to see the person who would best handle that, which would be a relationship coach or therapist. See? And let's say either one of you or both of you don't want to do that, time, money, so forth, work. That doesn't matter, because if you want the relationship to be healthy, what you want is secondary to what the relationship requires. That makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about desire. Now, in the West, we get mixed messages about what desire is. Sexual desire in the West has always been a goal. If it's low sexual desire. So low sexual desire in the West we should only have sex if it's procreative. Sex is a sin otherwise. Of course, this is bounded in many religions, yes? And I suspect, and I've read this elsewhere, so it's not my idea alone, of course, that when the Earth was far less populated, before 1900, there was fewer than 1 billion people on Earth. And we were in the millions until, very recently. Then, procreation was a necessary thing, because without modern medicine and antibiotics and so on, many, many children died, as did moms in childbirth. So procreation was a big deal. So they thought, well, if you wait to be, if you're fertile, you wait for fertility, then that was a good thing. And there's all sorts of things connected to that I don't want to go into, but that's a basic idea or premise. So in one way, the West wants you to only have procreative sex and otherwise have low sexual desire, but you're also supposed to always want sex. You're supposed to always be ready to have it when it's time, or when the male member in a male-female relationship wants to be sexual. That's an issue of property more than anything else. The truth is that there's a wide range of levels of desire for both males and females, and within any person, that level of desire fluctuates dramatically, from morning to afternoon, from morning to noon even. So lots of things get in the way of desire that's sexual, and some things augment it that may happen. And I always suggest that if a couple has intentions to be together physically at the end of a day, let's say, they would like to do that, and they'd like to carve that time out, and they carve that time out, then I suggest they have communication during the day in which they express that to each other, again, to keep the fire going, if you will. At least, the coal's still red. So sexual desire and sexual activity are part of our communication system. We've talked about this in previous videos, but sexual desire in part reflects our longing for pair bonding. Let me say it again. In part, sexual desire reflects our longing for pair bonding. Now, wanting sex may not have anything to do with the development of a pair bond. It can be just for enjoyment. But it harkens to, perhaps less so in humans, but harkens to the desire for a deeper connection. Sexual desire, in my way of thinking, makes concrete the ways that we value and give meaning to our partner and to our relationship with that partner. Now, sexual desire is always contextual, it's always relative and unequal. So it's contextual. So humans are capable of desiring sex at any given moment. Okay? We are not tied to estrous cycles of a female in order to be sexual. Most of our sexual activity is recreative. Okay? And that is an evolutionary development. It's connected to things we've talked about, like standing up and all sorts of things. Well, depending on the context you're in, obviously sexual activity doesn't take place. And so the desire for sexual behavior ebbs and flows, can occur at any moment, but ebbs and flows. And so where does this happen? Well, typically where you live, the domicile, okay, that's most typical, maybe in a car, but very few other places. Very few other places. Maybe a motel that you've gone out of town to stay in or something. And here's a point related to intimacy, but about sex. The person with the least desire for sexual activity controls the frequency of sex. So if somebody in a relationship has significantly greater desire on average than the other partner, then what you're going to find is the person who desires it more is going to be very frustrated, and the person who wants it less is going to feel pressured and won't understand what the big deal is, maybe. Or in some cases may wonder why they don't have more desire and be concerned about that and feel badly. So we have to deal with this. And when we get to the section later in the course on sex therapy and issues in sex therapy, we're going to talk about what to do about such things. I'm presenting the issue of desire separately right now. Okay. So what are ways that we can connect with each other? Now, what I mean by this is in a sexual way, but also an emotional way. What would be a protocol, if you will, and I'm going to give you one that I wrote some years ago, for couples who are in a sexual relationship and a relationship they'd like to go the distance, maybe a life partner, what can they do to become even more connected to each other? Okay, so this is how it goes. Whenever you meet, you reunite or separate, you have a full body hug until both of you are relaxed. For some people with a lot of anxiety, that may take a minute or two or three, you see. And they have to hang in there until they're relaxed. For people who are not as anxious, that may be 30 seconds or so. So you have to figure that one out. Second level of this protocol is to self-soothe yourself if you are typically anxious. So people who are anxious have responsibilities not just to themselves, but to their partners and to the relationship, to deal with their anxiety, whatever that takes, to use relaxation exercises, of which there are many kinds, to use therapy, to perhaps even have medication on board, not for the sole purpose of connecting to a partner, but to do for oneself what one can, and then also as part of that be more available to a partner and fulfill one's right word is responsibility within the relationship. Okay. The next level down of this connecting thing, protocol, is to look directly at each other eye to eye until you're connected. So sitting on the couch near each other, looking at each other eye to eye without saying anything for a few minutes. Have you ever tried that? That can be disconcerting the first time you try it, but after about a minute or two of staring at each other in the eyes, not saying anything, some dramatic things begin to happen. You begin to really sort of slide into the presence of your partner. The next level would be to lay together nude without touching until you're both relaxed. So some people have significant body issues. They don't have comfort with their own bodies. They imagine that their partner doesn't like the way they look. They may feel some shame. Being naked with someone is very vulnerable, even if they're your partner, even if you've been sexual with them, it can be vulnerable for many people. So this idea of laying together nude without touching, but just until you're both relaxed, is a cool thing. That can take several minutes or longer. I don't know. The next level is looking at each other during foreplay. You look at each other in the eyes as you touch each other. So many people avert their eyes, and for this, the next step is, as you might imagine, is looking at each other during intercourse. Or during intimate foreplay that's not just touching, but perhaps even oral sex or something, that you look at each other during that activity. Okay? There's something called the open eye orgasm that was, I believe, first developed by Schnarch, which most sex therapists talk about, and it's looking at each other with your eyes open during orgasm. And this is a very meaningful few moments to share. And it is possible to do. You can practice it. And then the next level down of connection is offering non-reciprocal pleasuring. Now, women know all about this in male-female relationships and in female-female relationships, that women more than men offer males sexual pleasure without receiving anything of any kind. And it's important that males sometimes do that as well. It's gifting ecstasy, is what I call it. And the last one is that you kiss for at least 5 seconds every day, at some point during the day. Yeah. Not a peck on lip, but lip to lip, lip lock. What the Romans called savolum. Okay, let's change topics for a minute. Talk about jealousy. I don't know where else to put this topic, so I'll put it here. Jealousy is a combination of envy and anger. The envy is you wish you had what someone you're looking at has, and you don't have it, and you wish you had that. That's envy. Perfectly fine. The jealousy is when the anger occurs that's telling you that you're mad that you don't have what you wish you had. That's jealousy. Okay? Occasional low-level jealousy is normal and can be provocative. So if you're at a party with your beloved and someone's flirting with them, or maybe they're flirting back and forth, and you happen to catch that, different people feel differently about that issue, by the way. But let's just say someone is flirting with your beloved. It's an old word, beloved. Your partner. Your boo, your bae. I don't know what the current terms are. Your boo. Okay. I like bae better. Okay, they're flirting with your bae. And you see that, and you get jealous because you're angry that you want to be flirting with them, and you want to be having the tete-a-tete with them, showing sexual interest, okay? And you're envious about what's going on. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Occasional low-level jealousy is normal and can be provocative. But pathological jealousy, on the other hand, can be very destructive, and it more closely resembles paranoia. So, pathological jealousy, wherein someone has no reason from history or any evidence to call into question one's partner's faithfulness, for example, is derived ultimately from insecurity and immaturity. Maybe more, maybe even certain psychological disorders, but let's leave those out and just say, for the most part, insecurity and immaturity. So what I'm saying is mistrust driven by past indiscretions is not jealousy. It's warranted concern. Okay? So pathological jealousy is inappropriate. Pathological jealousy in this way really means that you are on the lookout and see things where they are none related to your partner and their potential straying or their potential flirtiness or making themselves available to be flirted with, those kinds of things. All right. So what are the core contacts of a relationship? When is it that the two of you have the most critical moments together? Okay. One is first thing in the morning when you wake up. When you're both awake, that is, I should say. Second one is when you part, when one of you or both of you go out and take care of things, go to work, whatever. The third time is when you come back together again. The fourth time is at meals, sharing meals together. And the fifth is at bedtime when you're going to sleep. One or both of you go to sleep, okay? And those things bring with them a possibility of connection physically and emotionally. So you, at those contact points, affectionately hug and maybe kiss. Right? You don't have to have this be prolonged, but you hold each other's hands and look directly into each other's eyes. Yeah. Okay. So what do we do about asking for emotional intimacy and asking for sexual behavior? How do we do that? What's the way to handle that? Well, you may have to ask for emotional closeness and self-disclosure and partner disclosure or sexual behavior. You may have to ask for that. I mean, how is anyone going to know if you don't make it plain what you want? Now, some people do that non-verbally. I remember working with a couple where in the male-female relationship was very uncomfortable talking about sex openly. And so they devised a way for her to communicate that. And he would say, as he left in the morning or calling at lunch or whatever it was, what are we having for dinner tonight? And she would tell him because she was a stay-at-home mom and she made dinner every night. And if she was interested in being sexual, she would cook stir-fried vegetables in a wok. So she developed this response to that question, what are we having for dinner, by saying, well, I got the wok out, which meant she was maybe interested, could be talked into it or seduced, or I'm definitely making stir-fried vegetables. Interesting, yeah? But we've got to generally ask for what we want. Symbolism is great, but if you wait and hope to get what you want, sexually or emotionally, or that what you don't want is going to stop, then resentment's going to build up. And guess what? That's your issue. That's your responsibility. In terms of sex, we want to talk about what we want, specifically about sexual certain behaviors, when we're not having sex. To say what we like. What do we like emotionally as a build-up? What do we like in terms of foreplay? What constitutes foreplay? And you'd be surprised at what some people say. Vacuuming the carpet the day before could be an answer. I've heard that in therapy. Be very concrete. Be very upbeat. So we don't want to use a critical tone. We want to be. I'm really hoping that we could be together this weekend. How do you feel about that? Okay. And be flexible. What you or your partner wants this minute may be what they don't want the next minute, and what they want next minute something different, or next week. And across a lifespan, these things change in terms of what and how often and those kinds of things change. So we're talking about both the general topics of emotional closeness and sexual activity, as well as the specific things. Okay? All right. So how do you say things? How do you give feedback and ask for what you want sexually? Well, you can say things like, I love it when you, whatever. I like it when you, whatever. When you circle my, like that. I love kill kisses over my, I hold my so-and-so. I like it best when, it feels great when you squeeze my, and nonverbal encouragement. Okay? Now, the way you can do that is to guide someone's hand and say, I love it like this. Or they can put their hand over yours and say, I like to be touched like this. And of course, if it hurts, you say, ouch. Or stop. Just hold on a second. Okay? We have to teach each other what we like. We have to show each other what we like. We can't just say, oh, blah, blah, blah. You have to demonstrate. You have to shape behavior. We owe that to ourselves and our partners. Now, some couples do best when they get out of town a little bit. Yeah, I recommend the following on occasion with life partners who are busy and don't have a lot of private time. Go out of town if possible for at least 2 days. 3 days are better, because then you've got 1 day travel, the last day travel, and the 1 day in the sandwich between, which you get to be wherever you're going for the whole day. A local bed and breakfast is enough, and that might be just a 2 day thing or an overnight thing. If there are kids, try to farm them out to appropriate caretakers for a couple of days, maybe 3 days if possible. Another thing you can do is be sexual in different parts of the house. People get into ruts about that. Communicate desire when you're out in public, non-verbally and verbally, in little whispers perhaps, or a note passed at dinner or something. Do something non-sexual that your partner has been stressing about doing and doesn't really want to do, that they really appreciate. Maybe they hate to clean the microwave oven. Clean it. Maybe they really like a special enchilada that you make. Make it. I don't know. And then sharing household responsibilities. That's a big deal. And the reason that I keep bringing this up, and I have many times, is that there still exists a disproportionate chore percentage among males and females in heterosexual relationships, where females have more to do than males. Females often have school and or job and or kids and or cooking and or cleaning, and some people have all of them. And that's way more in some cases than the male has. Now, it's getting a little better, but there's still this disproportionation. I tell people or suggest to people to acknowledge efforts, acknowledge intentions, acknowledge personal qualities, focused on intention of behavior rather than outcome of behavior. Okay? And always focus on personal qualities. Yeah? Do it regularly. Do it when you feel it, so it's genuine. Include a hug or physical affection otherwise, without the need to hear anything back. So, honey, I really respect it that you go to a job that you don't like, that doesn't pay a lot, but we need the money, and I am so respectful of you for that. I think that's so cool and so strong of you. Okay? So that's the crux of the chapter on communication and sexuality. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye.